It's never been a better time to take a look at your personal finances than in the current economic climate. And here are 8 tips from an article that Vanguard recently published to help get your finances in order for 2025, to set you up for long-term investing success in the year ahead. Number 1 is to reassess your emergency fund. With many of us still being burdened by the cost of living crisis and rising domestic energy prices, it's important to reassess whether you still have enough cash set aside to cover an unexpected major expenditure or dip in income. A rule of thumb is to keep whichever is the greater of £2,000 or half a month's expenses in a bank account. My boiler recently stopped working, and its expensive replacement cost me about £3,500. And it was good that I had an emergency cash fund available to help me meet these costs, as I would not have wanted to dip into my longer term investments and to then impede my long term objectives. Vanguard also suggested it is worth having 3 to 6 months' expenses in an easily accessible account in case of income shock. And this income shock could come from illness or unemployment, for example. Even though interest rates have fallen, there are still decent interest rates available on easy access accounts, where you can then draw that emergency money without penalty but still benefit from a decent rate. Tip number 2 relates to how you budget. It's important to understand your day-to-day spending. How you manage your finances will affect your ability to save and invest, and setting a budget can help in this regard. I cannot stress how important it is to understand what you spend on a monthly basis. This is the only accurate way that you can set an achievable budget that will then allow you to set personal financial goals. And personally, I needed to go through a couple of months of spending before I could determine what my financial spending was. List all of your essential monthly costs. Everything from your mortgage, food and utility bills to your council tax, home and car insurance and childcare. I even list my monthly expenditure on my visits to coffee shops, which can add up. This helps to identify where you can save money, even if it's only a small amount like cancelling a subscription that you don't really need or cutting back on social events. When you subtract all your outgoings from your monthly salary, you'd be left with your disposable income. This is the money left over after all necessities. Many people will be able to save some of this disposable income, and some others also, when imposing curbs on excess spending or unnecessary expenses. Once you know your day-to-day needs, you can see whether you have a capacity to achieve other goals. Make use of a spreadsheet just like I do, so you can monitor your expenditure over time. And your financial plan can only really start when you understand what your budget is. If you haven't recently done so, it might be worth checking that your goals are still the same. Have priorities changed? Are you still on track to reach them? Could you consider investing a little more money each month to ensure you do get there? Even an additional £10 could make the difference in the longer term. For long-term goals, the earlier you start investing, the better. This is principally due to the power of compounding, where you earn a return on your return. Another way to leverage the power of compounding, particularly if you feel you may not be on track to meet your goals, is to increase your contributions. This can make a huge difference to how much you eventually end up with. And compounding is particularly powerful when investing in stocks and shares or funds, as dividends and capital gains, in addition to your regular deposits, are added to the value of your portfolio in addition to interest, with interest being the sole thing added to cash savings accounts, and one of the reasons why you get poorer returns in the longer term if only saving and not investing. Tip number 4 is to make the most of your tax allowances. In recent years, governments have reduced personal tax allowances on interest, dividends and capital gains. But this has become even more important since the autumn budget in 2024, because the chance to increase the rate of capital gains tax that investors have to pay when selling certain investments that have risen in value. These investments include shares, certain types of bonds and funds. The capital gains tax rate has risen from 10% to 18% for basic rate taxpayers and from 20% to 24% for higher rate taxpayers. Everyone has a capital gains tax allowance that currently sits at just £3,000 per year, and this has been reduced over the last few years. A simple way to save for the future, whilst limiting that capital gains tax bill, is to invest through an individual savings account, also known as an ISA, or a pension. Both ISAs and pensions will help shield your money from capital gains tax, and both come with their own tax benefits. They differ from a general invest or savings account, where you pay tax on any profits, dividends, or interest that exceeds your personal allowance. You have a £20,000 ISA allowance in the 2024 to 2025 tax year, which ends on the 5th of April 2025. You can also invest up to £60,000 or 100% of your gross relevant earnings, whichever is the lower, in pensions. If you have assets in general investing accounts or cash in non-ISA savings accounts and want to be tax efficient, you can seek to transfer these to more tax efficient accounts. Tip number 5 is to save regularly. How do you pay into your pension or ISA? Via irregular lump sums or monthly direct debit? If you're lucky enough to find yourself with a lump sum and have no other immediate need for it, then you may want to consider investing it to give your portfolio a boost. But a direct debit is a great way to get into good investing habits by contributing regularly. When things are done automatically for you, there is less chance that you will forget or make an excuse to divert those funds elsewhere for shorter term spending. Even a seemingly small additional direct debit amount can make a huge difference over the long term. These examples show how adding an extra £10 and £50 to your existing payment can add significant amounts after 25 years. There are many other good arguments for investing regularly into the account of your choice above what Vanguard advocates in their article. One of these in investing is called dollar or pound cost averaging. Dollar cost averaging takes the emotion out of investing by having you purchase the same small amount of an asset regularly. This means that over time, you buy fewer shares when prices are high and more when prices are low. Overall, dollar cost averaging can help reduce volatility in your portfolio, as it reduces the likelihood of large price swings that you might get if you were to have invested a lump sum. An example of this might be investing a lump sum the day before a market crash. Dollar cost averaging might reduce knee-jerk reactions if shares perform badly in the shorter term, and hopefully stop you selling out at the worst possible time. And Vanguard's next tip is to rebalance your investments. This is where you change your mix of investments or asset allocation in your portfolio if they move out of line with your attitude for risk. My current attitude for risk is that I now want a less volatile portfolio as I get closer to retirement, so I choose more stable assets in the form of a bond fund for 40% of my portfolio. I'm at a stage where I'll be putting my retirement plan into action shortly, so can do without the big fluctuations and short-term uncertainty that I might get from a 100% equity portfolio. But remember that your mix of assets is a key driver of portfolio returns and should be shaped to meet your goals. For instance, if you are young and have 20 or 30 plus years to go before retirement, you might be looking to get as much growth in your portfolio to build up the biggest amount possible for when you eventually stop working, not worrying about market swings as you will not be relying on funds in the shorter term. And even if your goals haven't changed, some adjustments might be needed. For instance, if you're targeting a mix of 60% shares and 40% bonds, and your shares perform better than your bonds over a year, your portfolio may contain more higher risk assets than you initially intended. And rebalancing can help you stay disciplined and avoid making costly mistakes. The most successful investors are often the ones with most discipline, those who stick to their investment plan and reevaluate it regularly to ensure that it stays aligned to any changes in goals or stage of life. You can choose funds that do this for you, and Vanguard suggests their Life Strategy Fund range in this article. This is how I started out when opening my account with Vanguard, and might be a consideration for beginner investors who do not have the confidence to do things for themselves. But if you do decide to do things for yourself, then you may need to balance things manually every now and again. And tip number 7 from Vanguard is to eliminate any cash drag. Do you have any excess of cash building in your investment account? This may be because of the income paid by some funds, or it may be because you were sometimes unable to buy an exact number of fund units each time you funded your account. Some brokers or investment platforms require a minimum purchase amount, and perhaps you do not have sufficient cash to make a purchase. Or it might be because you hadn't actually realised that dividends had been paid, and that you now have that spare cash sitting there. Holding cash can end up being costly. On reading this article, I checked on my own Vanguard account to find that there was £82 sitting there that had been paid out in dividends from one of the funds I'm invested in. I've quickly reinvested that back into a fund now, rather than it sitting there earning minimal interest, and then not adding to the compounding effect of my assets. Perhaps now is a good time to check if you have any of that spare cash in your account, and to make sure that you get this money invested as soon as possible. After all, it's time in the market, and not time in the market that counts in the long run, and every little bit counts. Tip number 8 from Vanguard, the last tip, is maybe the least interesting but probably the most important, and that is to get up to date with all your paperwork. Are your contact details with your investment provider up to date? Does your pension have named beneficiaries? This could be crucial when it comes to estate planning, as under current rules, pensions do not form part of the estate and as such, they are not covered by your will. Do you have a will in place? It's not something that people like to think about, but it's worth considering, especially if you have children, as no one knows what the future will bring. Well, there you have it. 8 tips from Vanguard that will hopefully make your investing journey more successful in 2025. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks very much for watching.